Hello, 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 and welcome to our November Government of Canada M365 Council meeting. If you joined us in September, you'll know that we kicked off season 4 of the council meetings with an update from Treasury Board on their journey to M365. We had CIO Paul Gerard and Senior Director Danielle Morneau presenting to us, and it was a great conversation. Today we have an awesome presentation lined up from Mike Wright at Microsoft. We're going to be talking all about Microsoft's modern workplace tools that really help enable us in this world of hybrid work that we're all experiencing right now. Next slide, Mike. My name is Lavanna Gatto. I am the sales director here at Orangutech. Orangutech founded these council meetings 4 years ago, and it's been so much fun to host these meetings since then and really watch as it's evolved from a couple dozen people around a boardroom table to over 100, 120, 130 people joining month after month online since the pandemic started. So Orangutech is one of Canada's top growing companies for the past 6 out of 7 years. We are a Microsoft partner in application development, content collaboration, and cloud productivity. And 95% of our business is with the Canadian federal government, working with over 60% of the core federal departments. Next slide. So as I said, it's been so fun to watch as these council meetings have evolved. Back at the beginning, departments would come in and talk about their plans, talk about their roadmaps of what it was going to look like to go to M365, to go to O365 back in the day. And since then, as months and years have passed, we've had departments talk about successes, challenges, lessons learned, what their implementation plans look like, and really everything in between, security, change management. It's been really fun to watch as this community has developed and the conversations have evolved. And I know a lot of you have been on this journey with us since close to the beginning. So always a big thanks to all of you who continue to join month after month and make this community exactly what it is. Next slide. For those of you who are new to the council meetings, welcome. And for those of you who maybe haven't stopped by in a bit, I did want to walk through just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. As you know, this is a Teams live event. So you do have the ability to ask questions throughout Mike's presentations. You'll see there's a question bar on the side. Just submit your questions there. Keep your name incorporated in the question because we may or may not ask anonymous questions. And if you see a question that's been asked that you would ask that's of interest to you, you have the ability to like it, and that moves it to the top of the list as I work through the list of the questions that will be asked at the end. So feel free to do that as well. Mike will be presenting for about 35, 40 minutes, and then we'll leave the rest of the time for questions. Just before we get started, we have our last council meeting of this calendar year scheduled at the end of this month. We wanted to avoid the holiday rush, so PSPC will be presenting on November 30th. Look out in your inbox later this week for an invite to that presentation. We're definitely looking forward to seeing what PSBC has been up to and what they're going to be presenting to us later this month. Next slide. Right, so I know for many of you, Mike Wright does not need a formal introduction. He's been with Microsoft Canada for over 8 years, leading the federal government towards a modern workplace. Today, Mike is going to talk to us about employee experience, flexible workplace solutions, and desktop modernization, just touching on Microsoft Viva, Teams, meeting rooms, and Windows 365. So I will pass things over to Mike, and I'll jump back in at the end for the question period. Over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Savannah. Good afternoon, good morning to everyone on the West Coast that are joining today, and thanks for hearing our story. As people know, we're in the middle of Microsoft's annual conference, so if people do have a chance, please check out Ignite. There's all sorts of very exciting things, especially related to Teams and what we're doing, you know, even as exciting as where we're going with the metaverse and virtual personas in Teams meetings. But for today, I wanted to spend the next 30 minutes talking about hybrid work. I'm pretty confident that across most of you and your organizations, the topic of hybrid work is a point of conversation at the most senior levels. Over the last several months, I've spent a lot of personal time with departmental executives and leaders trying to help them with their strategy around hybrid work. How many days will people return to the office and the physical workspace post-pandemic? And what are the kind of policy, tax, HR implications to hybrid work, and where does technology fit related to hybrid work? I think everyone would agree the genie is kind of out of the bottle related to remote work. It's not realistically possible to move back to a non-hybrid work model for the majority of organizations, both public sector and commercial. I like how our CEO Satya coined it. This does honestly represent the biggest shift in how people work in our generation. The only thing that could be the equivalent was the Industrial Revolution and how that changed how people work. But this is really going to fundamentally change how people work, and I would argue, especially in the public sector, as a lot of commercial and tech organizations over the last 10 years have been slowly moving to the concept of remote and hybrid work. But the pandemic has really accelerated this shift, especially in our most critical markets, our public sector markets who serve our citizens on a daily basis. And the biggest challenge we're seeing is what we call this hybrid work paradox. I think everyone here has recognized the benefits of remote work, the ability, to be there for your families, for your children, to have flexible work-life balance, so you can choose, how, when, and where you work. But on the flip side, I think most of us, also want that in-person connection. We've seen our social networks shrinking, despite the fact that we are probably forming closer relations through virtual, meetings and remote collaborative work with our direct peers that we work with. But we're missing that extended, community and that face-to-face, in-person interaction. So the challenge is people want to have their cake and eat it too. And this is going to be a challenge for organizations as to how do they address this paradox of providing a seamless, flexible remote work style, as well as, an in-office, in-person environment that is conducive to this new way of virtual meetings and making work more social and more attractive versus a place you have to go towards a place you want to go. And we often get asked as Microsoft, who serves, most large enterprise organizations across the globe, as well as a company that has over 160,000 employees in about 150 countries, there is no single answer as it relates to hybrid work strategy. You can see here across the globe from Microsoft, each individual region within our organization has a different perspective on how they see post-pandemic return to work, hybrid work policies and work styles. So there is no one size fits all when it comes to hybrid work strategy. You're going to need to assess, your environment, your culture, your employees, and obviously how you deliver services to citizens, and assess what your each individual, return to work strategy is going to be. And at the end of the day, you're going to need to embrace flexibility, because I think this has, been a catalyst for everyone to recognize the ability to be resilient and have flexibility, because who knows after we return to work what the next event will be that will have us need to work remotely for a more indeterminate period of time. So organizations really have to create this resilient, flexible infrastructure and culture around working. And there's really kind of three dimensions of work that for most of the people, especially ones that are working within the public sector, that are relatively new. Work used to be restricted to the confines of your bricks and mortar building, whether it's Place du Portage or the various large offices across the national capital here. But now work location and site has transcended to your home. Or the local coffee shop, as well as your work hours are now not necessarily tied to the time spent in the office, but now based on your deliverables and your work-life balance. So me, as an example, has 3 children. Earlier on in the pandemic, I had to be around to help with remote schooling. So my preference was to do a lot of my focused work later in the evening. So allowing me to flex my hours as well as my location, that's going to be critical in everyone's approach to hybrid work and return to work policies. This obviously presents, a lot of risk. I think a lot of ministers and executives across government are very concerned around the long, permanent impacts of remote and hybrid work. But I would argue it represents an even bigger opportunity for people if approached appropriately. And there's lots of questions that come from this. A lot of organizations still have a significant amount of BYOD, or what is the future of BYOD? Does it have to always be, an organizational or government furnished device when it comes to this idea of hybrid work, anywhere, anytime, any device? What is, our return to work and hybrid work policy going to be? What are the tax implications, insurance, financial, employee and HR implications of remote and hybrid work? What are we going to do with my existing investments around traditional communications and collaboration tools within my organization? Do they fit within a hybrid and remote work paradigm? A lot of people were, working from home for the last year and a half, and a lot of the traditional infrastructure related to communications was relegated to the workspace. So how does that fit in this new paradigm of anywhere, anytime work? And now that we're kind of moving out of the response phase of the pandemic, and we're now looking at return to work, what is the future related to your actual office space for hybrid work? Once again, work is no longer necessarily going to be a place you have to go to, but needs to be a place you want to go to for that social human interaction. And it also needs to be able to support this new paradigm of not 2 to 3 meetings a day, but potentially 10 meetings a day, where the majority of the participants are remote versus in person. So it's flipping a lot of that traditional meeting strategy on its head, where the in-person participant was the focus, to now it's more about the remote participants around collaboration and meetings. What does this mean as it relates to attracting and retaining talent within the government? You're hearing about the, this thing called the Great Reshuffle, and I'm hearing it consistently that there's a big concern around attrition, where people now have the flexibility to not necessarily work in the national capital or surrounding areas, but work anywhere, as well as the opportunity to work for different organizations that may have been headquartered in larger cities. So how do we continue to attract and retain the right talent long term with hybrid work. And what needs to happen culturally? I think some private sector organizations are a little more mature in their strategy around supporting employees, because now you don't just need to think of your employee as it relates to them being in the office. Now you need to think about their well-being and the culture of the organization, where you don't necessarily have your employees always in the office and in person. And one of the number one thing when you don't have those checks and in-person balance of coming into the office, how are people doing? Just because they're able and have the flexibility through technology like Teams to work remotely, how are they doing? Just because you can work anytime, anywhere, very often that gets abused, and you need to see how people are doing related to these new policies. And I think last but definitely not least is, how do we leverage this as an opportunity to create a more diverse and inclusive culture? This has been paramount for our CEO, Satya, around diversity and inclusion. How do we, take this ability to now have a broader landscape of talent and use technology and HR policies to create a more diverse and inclusive culture? I think many of you, especially ones that obviously work within the federal government, have seen the, exponential adoption of the Microsoft Teams platform over the last 18 months, and those numbers are actually a little dated, so they're probably a little bigger. But it's becoming quite clear in my conversations with departments that Microsoft Teams is becoming central to not just their remote work strategy, but also post-pandemic in-person work, as it's shifted to being much more collaborative, much more virtual. So when you hear me talk about some of the technology tools around where we're going with hybrid work, much of it's going to be focused around Teams, because this is not just a phenomenon here within Canadian government, but this is a global phenomenon where Teams is becoming, once again, central to how people deliver hybrid work. We like to kind of frame a lot of what's happened globally, as well as here in Canada, around this concept of responding to the pandemic, recovering, and then reimagining how work is done. Obviously, at the very onset, we worked with shared services and a lot of the, federal and crown agencies in Canadian government to allow the basic tenets and principles of remote work, such as communications, meetings, and collaboration. Hats off to everyone likely on this call who was part of that. It was, very impressive, and I know it took a lot of effort from many organizations to get that out, to allow employees to function and continue to deliver services. But we really kind of did put the cart before the horse. There was a strategy around, putting the right pieces in place before the government rolled out Teams to everyone, but we had to accelerate that due to the pandemic. So now we're kind of in this recover phase where most organizations are implementing those key security controls, looking at governance overall, not just around information, but governance around cloud services, platforms such as Teams, and what the long-term operational model will be to support this, because it's quite clear that it's not going away as a technology. And then how do we ensure end users are using the tools properly through training and adoption programs? But what I want to talk about today is more on the reimagine aspect of where we're going with hybrid work. And what I'd like to start with is this concept of employee experience. It's probably one of Microsoft's most exciting endeavors into this space, and it is really founded in what's come out of the pandemic with hybrid work. This is through a lot of research with industry leaders around employee experience about how organizations are going to need to modify how they support their employees in the context of remote and hybrid work. And, these are the 5 tenets that we've aligned our technology and our strategy to. Obviously, with well-being and engagement being a critical measure, right? You need, healthy, happy employees and engaged employees, right? You need, especially when people are remote. We hired 35,000 to 40,000 employees in the last year that have never met their boss or walked into their office. So how do you ensure they feel a sense of belonging and engagement with the organization in the context? And, Microsoft's not alone. I heard one of the executives within ESDC say ESDC hired approximately 10,000 people in a similar situation. So how do you ensure they are doing well, they are engaged and understand the corporate culture and feel a connection in community? And then how do people continue to grow and develop, right? How do you, move away from, traditional classroom-based learning, especially for those, people who choose to do more remote work? How do you ensure that they grow both professionally and personally? How do you onboard and bring people into an organization effectively? When you can't necessarily bring them into the office and have that mentor sitting beside them at their desk. And then giving people a sense of purpose, like what we're seeing, especially with the attrition and movement of talent, is people are choosing their professions more and more around a sense of purpose than, financial incentives or pension. Obviously, that's part of it. But you need, to be very clear in, your organizational purpose and how you align your employees to that. And that comes into culture and communications. How do you ensure you're effectively communicating with employees? They're overwhelmed with back-to-back meetings. How do you address that idea of culture and communication? And then with the overwhelming amount of information, how do you ensure people have the right access to the right information at the right time? So we launched Microsoft Viva, and it really is founded in these 4 principles. We have Viva Connections, and this is really the idea of bringing, engagement in the context of teams and in the flow of how you work. So bringing, in essence, a corporate intranet into teams to make it more effective. I know personally, I have spent a lot more time on the Microsoft corporate intranet because it is surfaced in teams in the flow of how I work. Another one that is very top of mind across government now is this concept of insights, where people at a personal level need the ability to understand, and book time to be more focused, to take mental breaks, to delay emails in the evening, to protect time of others, as well as organizational insights. So at the minister level, how are my people working? Are they okay? What are the collaboration patterns around how I, look to bring people back into the office? The third pillar is called Viva Topics, and that's the idea of surfacing information in the flow of how people work versus going out and finding the relevant information. And then the last but not least is something called Viva Learning. And once again, this is leveraging existing content and learning management systems, but bringing it into the flow of how you work within teams. And obviously, all of this is part of a broader ecosystem. So, you can connect into other applications, other tools, HR, learning, ERP tools that you have to make these capabilities more relevant. So I mentioned Viva Connections, and once again, this is the idea of creating a much more engaging ability for leaders to communicate to their employees. So once again, think of it as a tailored corporate intranet surfaced in Teams, mobile, tablet, full client, browser. And it's not just that it's accessible in the flow of how you work, but it's tailored to you. So when I go to my corporate Microsoft page in Teams through connections, it's specific to Canada, it's specific to my role, it's specific to my applications and my community. So it is really, you know, my landing page for all things Microsoft. So Viva Insights, once again, really helps people. I know if I don't use Insights on a weekly basis to book focus time, I will have 10 to 12 meetings a day where I no longer have the ability to focus. I, as I mentioned, work late, so it will automatically delay my emails based on my colleagues' working hours to minimize stress and, you know, burden on them outside of their working hours. And then at organizational levels, once again, you can look at, you know, who's at risk of burnout, you know, what are the collaboration patterns around how I plan return to work. And then Viva Learning. Once again, many of you probably have lots of virtual learning tools, such as similar to Microsoft. But what I like is that when I go into Teams, when I have a moment to focus on my learning, I can quickly just click the learning button in Teams. It pushes up my mandatory learnings. It surfaces relevant learnings. And then as a manager, it's very easy for you to assign learning to your direct reports and manage that, and then make it social by sharing it in conversations and chats within Teams. And then Viva Topics, once again, it's the idea that you manage and curate information, and then it leverages AI to surface it in the flow of how you work. So if you type the word SOAR in a chat, it would pull up the content card, all the relevant information, as well as if you were working in Office or Outlook. So kind of like a Wikipedia link for enterprise organizational content that's surfaced in the flow of how you work. Everyone always kind of wants a summary, so I put this slide up, which we can share out after the presentation, and then obviously the questions around licensing come up. Some of this, albeit new, is part of the the existing, at least federal baseline licensing, such as connections, such as personal insights, but others are relatively new and an incremental cost, obviously. And once again, we're not doing this alone. So you can bring your own learning management systems, your own HR insights. You can bring your own, content providers, but we're bringing that into the fold to enhance it, the service. So now what I want to do is quickly shift to worksite modernization. Once again, I've been in many departmental offices here in Ottawa as well as across the country, and I think a lot of those spaces were predicated on two things. One, very much on the idea of scheduled meetings, as well as the idea that the in-person participants are kind of number one, where you would have 90% of the participants physically in the boardroom, and perhaps 5 to 10% possibly virtual, and very often they're somewhat second-class citizens. They can't necessarily see the content, they can't necessarily feel engaged with the people in the room, they can't collaborate on content. So we're very much taking an approach that both virtual and in-person should have a similar user experience, and we do this across both personal devices. I think people need to reassess what they have in their home offices as a long-term, hybrid work solution, as well as what the office of the future looks like, because there's going to be a larger need for more spaces for virtual collaboration, such as huddle rooms, such as the ability to host meetings effectively in a lobby, on a couch. But most importantly, I think the boardrooms need a new look at how people participate, collaborate. I think a lot of you are familiar with chatting, sharing information and content, co-authoring, working together in virtual, and I think that needs to transcend into the physical space. At home, I would highly suggest, if you're not already doing so, up your game around technology. I'm here on Poly Bar, so it has my speakers, mics, has hopefully good quality video, as well as a lot of noise suppression to reduce dog barking, kids coming home from school. And then as you look to coming back to the office, the Microsoft backend provides lots of innovative AI-based capabilities that will help, especially in a post-pandemic model. We have things such as proximity beaconing, so that when I walk into a boardroom and I'm about to join a meeting or already on a meeting, I can transfer that meeting to the boardroom technology. Companion feature, which I use at home, the ability to leave this meeting and transfer it to my phone seamlessly without any of the virtual participants being aware, so that I can go pick up my children without disrupting the meeting. And then obviously around inclusive meeting features, such as we now have, closed captioning, both in Canadian French and English. We have, transcripts and recording. We have different view modes for different accessibility capabilities. PowerPoint Live in meetings leverages screen readers. And then for traditional analog, a lot of the new meeting room solutions can actually capture analog whiteboard content and turn it into digital inking capabilities. And whiteboard, I think, has now finally, after many years of digital whiteboard iterations, become much more popular and mainstream. So we're really investing heavily in the Microsoft whiteboard. It's now built into Teams. And then coordinated meetings between Teams room systems and Surface Hub to really get the best of both worlds for those larger, more complex rooms. Another benefit is we don't make most of this technology. This is built by our very big, industry-leading partners, and they come up with amazing systems that can address almost any size or style of meeting space. And then obviously we have our Microsoft Surface Hub first-party devices that really are this all-in-one system for hosting boardroom, huddle room, executive office type meeting scenarios. We'll go through all of these, but once again, through our first party and partner ecosystem, we obviously can address pretty much any meeting room size. If anyone's been to our office, our main room accommodates over 100 people, multiple screens. The nice thing is it's still a one-touch join. I walk up, I tap a button. The user experience is, no different than what I'm doing here at home, but with the ability to integrate into larger complex environments. Teams panels, so we also have partners that now have Teams panels, so we can actually integrate these into the Return to Work Power App. So a lot of departments are using our Power App to authorize return to work. You can scan QR codes, and now you can even look to link that into booking the physical boardroom, ensuring the appropriate space, based on COVID constraints. So lots of really exciting things coming, and also being announced at Ignite this week. But we know most organizations still have a significant investment in VTC technologies already. So we know there's going to have to be an interop solution. No one has the luxury of revamping all of their physical space in the office. So there's cloud video interop that allows H323, Cisco, Polycom solutions to participate in Microsoft Teams meetings, as well as direct guest join from a lot of the Microsoft Teams room systems. The last piece, and there are more, as you noticed, but we won't have time today, is around desktop modernization. I think a lot of organizations are recognizing that, employees, some will continue to work remotely more so than in the office, and the idea of staging and shipping equipment and maintaining a static desktop image is no longer going to be sufficient to support kind of the innovation and the ability to onboard and bring in new hires when working virtually. So they're looking at different approaches around desktop modernization. BYOD was a huge challenge throughout the pandemic for most organizations. A lot of new employees were hired, contractors, external, and they needed access to sensitive information, and they needed it quickly. And the ability to scale was definitely a challenge. So I think from a business continuity, once again, people are looking at new approaches to providing desktop solutions to their employees and contractors. They need to meet, obviously, the protected B criteria for federal government and other regulatory requirements and other verticals. They need to do it quickly. Ideally, it would be the experience I have. If I need a new computer, I can pretty much go to Best Buy, sign in, and have a device provisioned for me that meets my organizational requirements and my user experience. So a lot of departments have been looking at modern desktop management with Microsoft Endpoint Manager and Microsoft Surface or other Microsoft Windows devices. But many also looked at virtualization and VDI, whether it was Windows Virtual Desktop or Citrix solutions throughout the pandemic to support a lot of the BYOD access to federal applications. But what we want to talk about today is what we call desktop as a service. That is really the new Windows 365. So it's taking the same principles and tenets of Windows Virtual Desktop, now called Azure Virtual Desktop, but taking the effort out of it. So really providing what you would normally do through a VDI experience as a prepackaged Windows 365 offering. So you don't necessarily need the knowledge and time to set up an Azure environment to host Windows Virtual Desktop and apply all the Citrix or VDI applications to deliver that on any computer. We do that natively through a software as a service model. And the beauty is this is a solution that can be deployed quickly by IT. It provides the appropriate controls to allow access to applications and services that meet the security requirements. And it's, from a user perspective, great because you can access it on any device with a browser and an internet connection. It is a common user experience. They get the full flow of how they work when they go between environments and devices, and it's always up to date. It's obviously built on a lot of the capabilities that have already been implemented across most organizations. It uses the same identity fabric that you're using today to consume Teams. It uses the same security tools that a lot of departments are using. And it uses the same endpoint manager solution in conjunction with tools like CCM, and it delivers a consistent experience. It'll be important, I think, as people look to moving to Windows 11 as potentially a modern desktop deployment model as well. And I think some of the biggest areas we're seeing in the early days is obviously bring your own device models, but also high capacity computing. Not everyone has the luxury and benefit of having a high performance device. And there's developers and other people that need more performance in compute and access to sensitive information, as well as, throughout the pandemic especially, there's been a lot of temporary workforces that have needed access to applications. And this provides a really simple ability to deliver that. And it comes in different flavors, obviously, depending on, the user requirements. We have, higher tiers of performance that are available. And then once you set up the foundational identity environment, really you can start to offer your corporate image through Windows 365 as a service to end users. And the provisioning model is the same, which is great. So you can use the same tools you use today to push out your corporate desktop image, and you can do it through Windows 365. Another benefit, obviously, for applications like Teams is we have a native backend connection within the data center environment to ensure the best performance for real-time media and video and things such as that. So that was, you know, three of many things I think you need to consider, and Microsoft has to offer around hybrid work solutions that you haven't already done today with tools like Teams. What I want to make very clear is that any of these initiatives is not anymore just about, you know, IT. It really is an organizational wide effort. When we talk about employee experience, this is very much an HR conversation. It's top of mind around what their policies will be. And then IT security, as anyone who's, you know, got their authority to operate or move further along in their deployment knows too well, security needs to be at the table at the beginning. And then how do you support this and operationalize this day two? And then when we are talking about, you know, looking at the physical office infrastructure and boardroom technologies, your real estate and facilities should also be at the table. Just wanted to leave you with a few links. These quick start guides in this work lab document are fantastic. They have, you know, really good insights as to not what's just driving our strategy, but what we're seeing across the globe around hybrid work trends. You know, what do leaders need to think about? And I would argue, if you have time this week, please check out Ignite. I learned a lot myself yesterday around where we're going with tools like Teams. Really exciting. Such as the idea that you can look to creating virtual personas in virtual offices. Like Accenture created a virtual office where you can take your avatar, go to the virtual office, have a coffee, and collaborate with your peers. So really kind of cutting edge, but interesting things around where we're going with the platform to support things like hybrid work. So I'll stop there. I probably went a little over my 35 minutes, so hopefully Silvana is okay with that, and happy to, you know, open it to questions. And if I have the answer, I will do my best.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Mike. That was awesome. It's always fun to get an update from you guys. I remember I always tell this story, and I think I told it when I presented back in the summer, that I remember when I started with Orangutech just over 4 years ago, and I went to a Microsoft conference. You guys were just like starting to talk about the cloud, and everyone was so cautious of what does it look like to go to the cloud? Is the government even going to go there? What does security look like? And it seemed like security conversations were where the conversation stopped. And just to see how far those conversations have come in 4 years, to see that this kind of, if this stuff was presented at that presentation 4 years ago, people would be like, you're crazy. There's no way that this is coming and going to be part of the day-to-day government of Canada. And here it is. So it's pretty cool. We have a few questions coming in, so I will jump into it. Everyone that is on the line, definitely still get your questions in. We still have time. So post them in the chat and we'll get Mike to answer them. Mike, to kick things off, from Robert Tremblay, Microsoft has been adding great new features to Teams to help us in work, and he applauds your efforts. Are there any plans to add features around multilingual for Teams meetings with support for alternate audio channels or simultaneous translations?
Yes, this has been probably one of the most requested features coming out of the federal government. So we have taken that to our product and engineering teams earlier on in the pandemic. We know it's a capability of Zoom, especially around alternate audio channels natively within the platform. Ironically, we discovered this is pretty much unique to the Canadian federal government, which surprised me. but it is coming out later in the next calendar year as a feature for separate audio channels, so you can have the ability to listen in different languages or have a bilingual stream. And then on the transcription, we just, I think last month, so it should be coming into your environment soon, added French Canadian captioning when you turn on transcription in a meeting. So just to be clear, that allows you to specify Canadian French as the language of the presenters or speakers in a Teams meeting. It does not translate the message, but it will allow you to select the captioning to be done in French when you transcribe a Teams meeting. Similar to what you have in English now. We've added the ability to do it in French, and I foresee the translation in captioning coming soon. We've alluded to it for several Ignites now. I just don't have a specific timeline around translation in regular Teams meetings. Obviously, in live events, we have simultaneous captioning in different languages, but it's hopefully coming to standard Teams meetings soon.
Amazing. Thank you. I just got a note saying that the question box was closed. It's open now. Thank you, Matthew, for letting me know. So if that's the reason why some questions haven't been coming in, question box is open, so definitely dump your questions there. But moving along, Mike, how does SharePoint Online, Teams, and Viva fit together as part of the employee experience? I know you talked a little bit about this earlier, but maybe we can dive a little bit deeper.
Yeah, SharePoint is pretty foundational to many of the Viva capabilities, and I'll pull up a slide just to make the discussion a little more relevant. Here we go. So when we think of Viva connections, that is 100% dependent and predicated on SharePoint. So the idea that you can surface your corporate intranet on SharePoint. So if you have a SharePoint communication site or intranet site, you can now pull that into the context of Teams and customize that experience through Viva connections. So that is, very SharePoint dependent. Similarly on topics, right? Viva Topics is going to lean heavily on SharePoint to publish some of that content, but we are looking at external connectors for Viva Topics to external solutions, but that's still to be determined. And Viva Learning, once again, obviously you can import other learning management systems and content services such as LinkedIn Learning and some of the bigger third-party players, but we're also allowing Viva Learning to pull content from SharePoint. So those are all relatively dependent on SharePoint, and then Viva Insights really gets the most of its data and telemetry from Exchange and Teams, with a little bit from SharePoint, but majority of the telemetry is coming from Exchange and Teams.
Perfect. And how about how Viva Learning fits into Microsoft's learning pathways for SharePoint?
Yeah, so once again, the details are literally being released this week, so we'll know more. But the idea is you should be able to bring in, any learning content provider, including Microsoft, into, Microsoft Learning in Viva, into, once again, the flow of how you work. So you can take, Learning Pathway, SharePoint, LinkedIn Learning, and third-party learning platforms and bring that into Teams as an application or a tab, as well as your learning management systems to, curate and manage and assign learning across the organization.
Perfect. Lots of likes on the multilingual, I feel as
yes, and I see Matthew's question there as well. Yeah, if people aren't aware, we do recognize this, and we actually, outside of the standard formal product engineering, I know people know about user voice to ask for product and feature requests. We have, for the Canadian federal government, a special channel through our accessibility and official languages team to support product feature updates. So please share that with your Microsoft account team, or we are consolidating those requests through shared services. So, submit any official languages or accessibility challenges related to our platform directly to us or through shared services, because we are curating and managing a big list that is being assessed both by product engineering as well as our accessibility officers to figure out how and when they will be integrated into our product releases.
Perfect. We still have 10 more minutes. If anyone else has questions, feel free to drop it into the question box. I know we did get a question about whether this presentation is being recorded. It is being recorded. It will be on the Orangutech YouTube channel, and we'll make sure that you all have the link to that. You can always visit Orangutech's YouTube channel to watch past Government of Canada M365 council meeting. There's a lot of great content there. Seeing another question come in. Is Viva part of the enterprise agreement, or is there an additional cost to the GoC?
So go back to that slide I had, because the answer is yes and no. So once again, the Government of Canada baseline license, the M365 E3 that all federal partner and client departments have, includes connections, and it includes personal insights, but it does not include what we call manager and leader insights, Viva Learning, or Viva Topics. Those are additional. Most of those, some of those are on the framework agreement. Others are, still coming out this week. So not currently on the framework agreement, but we'll be looking to add them soon.
Okay. I know we didn't talk necessarily about learning pathways today, but do you want to just talk to the difference between Viva and learning pathways?
Yeah, so Viva Learning is really not about providing the content itself. It's about, it's really about bringing any of your content solutions, once again, be it Microsoft or be it third party, into Teams. You can see this learning button here, the ability to bring all of your corporate learning content into Teams, the ability to tie it into an LMS tool so that you can manage it at an organizational and a direct manager level to assign that learning and have people consume it in the flow of Teams. Once again, I love this personally because Microsoft has probably access to every learning platform on the planet, but I was completely unaware. There was different links to different places, and to be honest, learning for me was something that happened at the end of the month when I got a nasty note from my manager suggesting that I had not finished my mandatory learning. And so now that it's in Teams, it's great. I can just, when I have a few moments, I can go to the learning tab, I can see what's assigned to me, when it is due, and then I can see what's suggested for me, whether it's, professional growth, I want to learn more about the products and solutions I support, or whether it's just, personal growth. There's all sorts of personal growth content available to me, and it's all in one curated spot that's easy for me to access.
Right. I know we just talked about the licensing, but is Viva part of the E5 bundle?
No, it is. Other than what is part of the E3, okay. The Viva licensing is above the E5 suite. So it is a separate add-on SKU, and we're announcing a super Viva SKU that combines all of these under one price if people are interested in all of the pillars of Viva.
Perfect. And should anyone that's interested be reaching out to you, Mike? How are people going to get more information, or if they want a specific department presentation?
Yeah, obviously you can reach out to me directly. My email, I'll jump back, is available. Maybe more effective to reach out to your Microsoft account representative. But if you do not know who that is, I'm happy to spend time with you and talk more about any of these topics here today. So you can just send it to mike.wright@microsoft.com or your account representatives.
Perfect. All right, well, I think that wraps up question period. Thank you so much, Mike. That was an awesome presentation. It's always nice to get you guys back in here and do a Microsoft update, Microsoft presentation every few months. Just as a reminder to everyone on the line, we do have an additional council meeting happening at the end of this month, November 30th. PSPC will be presenting. You'll have an invite in your calendar later on this week, so keep your eye out for that. And also, we're always open to new presenters. That's what makes this community and these meetings fresh and live and so great. So if you or someone at your department would like to present, have a topic that you would like to talk to, definitely reach out to the Orangutech team and let us know, and we'll definitely get you filtered into the roster. I think that's it for today. So everyone have an awesome rest of your day, and we'll talk at the end of the month. Bye, you guys.